This is the simplest strategy to complete 11 waves in the Colosseum before the final boss. You don't need expensive gear or to be able to prayer flick between multiple NPCs. This tactic will simply allow you to kill one thing at a time and to show you how to unstack multiple things so you can achieve this, no matter how many there are. For your gear, you need to be on Ancients with your best magic setup, plus a rune pouch with Blood, Death, Soul and Water runes to cast Ice Barrage and Blood Barrage as well. If you don't have the level, you can use Ice Burst and Blood Burst instead. You then want a melee switch. I've gone with an 8-way switch, but honestly 4 items is plenty, it just lowers your DPS. And don't worry, you will have all the time in the world to change gear, you won't need to do 1 or 2 tick switches. As part of your melee setup, it is important though that you have an amulet of Blood Fury. This is going to heal you up while safe spotting many creatures and means you don't have to worry about any little mistakes that you make. For the melee weapon, you either want your best slash weapon or the Fang. There's very little difference between the two, apart from the scythe, which I'll come to and again isn't necessary. That's all you need for this. However, as you get better and need less supplies, you can add in the following items just to speed up the runs. A spec weapon for damage such as the Dragon Claws, a range switch, T-bow is especially good here as well as the Venator bow, a Saradomin Godsword just for the special attack to restore a bit of prayer, and also the scythe as mentioned, which is the best weapon against any of the larger creatures. For your inventory, a super combat potion or 2 or divine super combat potion, 5 brews and the rest restores. As you get better doing this, you won't need most of these restores, but initially this will simply allow you to leave your prayers on constantly and concentrate on the mechanics, and it's just one less thing to worry about. These are the NPCs that will spawn throughout the waves. If you know these already, I've timestamped to the next part below. Every wave's going to start with 3 Fremniks and at least one other thing. The 3 Fremniks consist of 1 melee, 1 range and 1 mage. Now if you hit them with a weapon that they're weak to, you'll always hit your max hit with that weapon. However, we'll be simply barraging them to kill all 3 as they're pretty weak to magic. This is also going to freeze them in place and they can never attack you if you're 3 squares away. The Shaman has just a standard magic attack with a max hit of 28 and the only creature that attacks from distance with a normal attack range. Everything else has a much larger range of around double the usual distance. The Javelin attacks with range and also has a special attack every 4 attacks, where it throws a javelin up in the air and it lands where you were standing a couple of ticks after the animation starts. The Manticore takes 10 ticks between attacks, but he attacks with all 3 combat styles within 3 ticks. Above its head will appear 3 projectiles and after a while it will attack you starting from the bottom 1 up. Blue is magic, green is range and red is melee. It can start with the range or magic and always finishes with the melee. Once it starts attacking, there's 1 tick between each attack and all you do is have your prayer on the first thing it's about to attack you with, and after the first one moves or you hear the sound for the first attack, click on your next prayer and then slowly the one after that. I say slowly because 0.6 seconds is quite a long time to react and you're probably far more likely to click too quickly, anticipating it, and take a lot of damage than you are to click it too slowly. Next up is the Shockwave Colossus, which is an upgraded version of the Shaman. It only ever attacks with magic, but does have a larger attack range and a max hit of 56. That is all the creatures that can spawn at the start of the wave, but after 45 seconds you will get an additional 1 or 2 NPCs that spawn. It'll either be 1 melee NPC on their own, or 1 melee plus another Shaman in the early waves or a Shockwave in the later ones. The melee NPC that spawns in waves 1 to 6 is the Jaguar Warrior. Its only attack is melee and if you pray against it, it will never hit you. But if it hits you off prayer, it hits like an absolute truck, and just 1 attack has about a 50% chance to kill you even at high health. The Minotaur spawns from waves 7 to 11 and doesn't hit quite as high, but it will heal any other creature that it can see, although it won't heal things that your line of sight are from. Every creature when praying from correctly does no damage at all, except the Javelin special attack. For the strategy, these are the only tiles that you're going to need marked, and I'll paste them in the description so you can copy and paste that into your tile pack in RuneLite to automatically mark them off for you. For the video, I'll be using the northwest pillar at the start, and the camera will be facing east for the majority of the time. Every wave is the same tactic except for the first wave where you can simply protect from magic, freeze the Fremniks and then barrage them until they die, then kill a Shaman and make sure to quickly move to the start tile. You're then going to need to choose a modifier that increases the difficulty, and I'll go through the best ones to choose for this tactic later on. So this is the start location for every single wave. Creatures can spawn in many locations, but they can't spawn within 4 tiles of where you start. So by standing here, nothing will spawn on this side of the arena. Before you start any wave, you can heal up or change your gear and then simply speak to the NPC Minimus to select the modifier and start the next wave. So set up your quick prayer to protect from range and augury if you have it, if not just your best offensive magic prayer. Start off in your magic gear with your auto cast on Ice Barrage. So make sure you can see most of the arena, choose your modifier, and as soon as you click continue, you want to move 5 ticks or 3 seconds later to the number 1 tile, just as the NPCs start to spawn. Getting used to the timing of this is really important, as nothing can attack you for just enough time to get to the number 1 square. So if you're late moving, you won't die, but you will take unnecessary damage, and if you're early, that's even worse, as an NPC spawning on this side of the arena can really mess up the strategy. On the way to the number 1 tile, you want to see what creature, if any, is on this side of the room, and if needed, change your prayer accordingly to what it attacks with. That creature is the only thing that's going to attack you at the start. Once you're on tile number 1 and praying correctly, get ready to attack the Fremnik Archer as they come round the corner. The reason we picked the Archer is as it comes round the corner, that's going to be the middle one, so it'll hit all 3 of them. This is then going to freeze them in place and you can move to tile number 2. If for any reason any of them doesn't get frozen, which doesn't happen very often, you can attack the one that's free and then move to tile number 3. This is going to be the setup for every single wave, and you'll usually have one creature attack you from here that you're praying against so can't damage you. The Fremnik's frozen in place and 3 tiles away, so they can't attack you either, and every other creature's safe spotted behind the pillar. Even if the one that attacks you is a Manticore, which attacks with all 3 combat styles, because it charges its attack, you still have time to freeze the Fremniks, move away before worrying about the attacks from the Manticore. That simple tactic works for about 85% of the waves, and I'll come to what we do with the other 15% shortly. Now with this start, once you've killed the Fremniks, you can then kill whatever creature is over here. There are then 1 or 2 creatures that spawn 45 seconds into every wave, which will either spawn just before or after you kill this creature, and then you just switch over to your melee gear and kill the ones that have just come out. When you stood against this pillar here, they'll never come around this corner, so even if 2 creatures spawn in that wave, it's not a problem as only 1 can attack you at a time. It is important though to always wait for a creature to move into position before you attack it. Otherwise, if you so much as pop your head around the corner just for 1 tick, you're probably going to die in the Colosseum. The unstacking of the creatures behind the pillar is the easy part, and later I'll show you all the ways to do it safely, no matter how difficult it first appears. But first, as I said, that only works about 85% of the time, and when it does, it's a nice easy wave regardless of the level, but there are a few things that can happen. Occasionally, you'll have 2 creatures spawn on this side. The odds of this happening are fairly small since we're blocking most of the spawn places here, but it does occasionally happen. If it does and they're the same creature, just carry on as normal as you're protecting against the combat style anyway. But if they're 2 different things, in most waves you can simply move to the northern part of the pillar and you will then have 1 creature to kill as before to freeze the Fremniks in place and kill them. What you do after that is really down to your ability. The problem with being on this side of the pillar is those NPCs that spawn after 45 seconds aren't safe spotted this side, and in some waves that's a melee and a mage. There is a plugin already called Fortis Colosseum which does help a lot to look at before each wave, and where it says line it just means Manticore. You could prayer flick, but it is extremely risky as you have very little room if they're on the same tick, so the safest bet in my opinion is to simply run around the back of the northeastern pillar to this tile here as soon as the Fremniks are dead. If there's a Manticore up in this wave and it hasn't started charging yet, you can completely ignore it. It takes longer to charge an attack and use it than it takes you to get to the next pillar. However, if it is charged, concentrate on just blocking the attacks of the Manticore and then praying against the next hardest hitting creature after its last attack. When running to the next pillar, each creature will hit you twice apart from a Manticore which if charged will hit you with the 1 attack cycle. So after you've prayed against the Manticore, always switch to range or mage depending on what's up. For example here, there's just 1 mage up and a Manticore, so I pray against the Manticore and then switch to protect from magic. Since the Manticore always starts with mage or range, there's a 50-50 chance anyway that I'm going to protect from the magic attack without even trying. But worst case scenario like here, I eat 1, but it isn't a problem anyway because we're going to heal it with our Blood Fury and we can always use our blood spells if needed. There is a way to put them on the same tick, which I'll go through on the unstacking part later in the video. But honestly, just get yourself to this pillar before the melee spawns, and if you use 1 or 2 doses of brew on one of the waves that has a particularly difficult spawn, it really isn't the end of the world. When you run around to the other side of this pillar, make sure to stand in this tile here. because if there's a melee and a mage that spawn mid-wave, they always block each other on this corner. The mage blocks the melee like this if it's first to the corner, and the melee blocks the mage like this if it's the other way around. The second problem that you can face is very specific, and only happens if you have low DPS on any wave, where a Manticore or Javelin are the ones on the south side when you start, and where the mid-wave creatures include a mage, and finally, where the mage comes out in front of the melee. It sounds like it's never going to happen, but it does happen every so often. If the melee comes out first, it blocks the major, so you don't have to worry. But if not, and you haven't killed the ranger or the Manticore that's up from the start, they're both going to be attacking you at the same time when the mage walks around the corner. With high DPS, killing this creature quickly completely solves the problem, but if not, there's a couple of things that you can do. You can prayer flick between the two if you're comfortable doing that. You can bring a spec weapon and take out the mage quickly, or you can run to this pillar, making sure to pray against Manticores as a priority, and then again the next hardest hitting creature after its attack. Again, I'll go through the unstacking phase later in another section, and what to do once you reach the other pillar. Finally is the worst spawn that you can get, which rarely happens, but annoyingly if it does, it usually happens on wave 10 or 11. This can only happen on wave 6, 8, 10 or 11, because these waves have 4 things that spawn at the start of them, plus the Fremenix. You can get a spawn where there are 2 things on either side of the pillar that attack you with 2 different combat styles. Usually it's a Manticore and another creature, so you can protect from the other creature and freeze the Fremenix and move away as usual. Then kill them whilst concentrating on the Manticore's attacks, and then switching prayers back to the other creature when the Manticore is recharging. If done correctly, there's only 2 ticks where you're praying against something other than what this creature is attacking you with. So just by chance, it's more likely than not that you're going to actually be praying against both creatures by continuing to do that. But if the Manticore is off tick with the other creature, you can freeze either of them and walk to this tile here, which is temporarily, whilst it's frozen, a safe spot. And that's going to do a couple of things. It's going to give you time to heal up if needed, and it's also going to change the rotation, so hopefully once the other one becomes unfrozen, they're going to be on the same tick. If you absolutely aren't comfortable with that and you can't prayer flick, it's worth bringing a tickie just in case you get a wave like this. You can then run to number 1 as usual, then around the back of this pillar to the northeastern pillar, making sure as usual to protect against the Manticore as a priority if they have charged their attack, and then the next hardest hitting thing. But even still, it's high risk. That being said, the Fremenix never attack you whilst you're running, and at least one Manticore shouldn't have charged its attack at this point. So as long as you're decisive and act quickly on those waves, you really shouldn't die. Then, once you're in the northeast corner behind this pillar, freeze the Fremenix as usual, and if one creature followed you around the pillar, pray against it like you normally do, and kill the Fremenix. You can't freeze the Fremenix if you're brewed down, so if this happens, run back and forth behind the pillar whilst you drink a restore, because as long as you're moving, they don't attack you. Once you've killed everything near you and you have a stack behind a pillar, you're completely safe. The wave may take a while, but you should never die at this point, and here's how to kill anything at that point. First though, these mechanics and locations are very important to understand. At the northwest pillar, where we're going to be 90% of the time, creatures can't walk around either of these corners. Rangers and mages can attack you from them, but they can't move past the corner. Plus, any creature next to one stuck on any of these corners can't attack you whilst you're killing the one on the corner. Any creatures stuck behind them like this though can attack you. When it's safe, always try to make a habit of killing creatures from this side of the pillar first. That's because if you stand here and there's a creature behind the northeast pillar, it stays stuck behind it. But if you go the other side, it comes out from behind it, and sometimes they're so easy to miss and you don't even realise there's one up there. The Shaman has the shortest range, and if there's another creature in front of it, you can kill that creature even if the Shaman's behind it by standing on one of these safe squares. I'd mark this for the starting pillar, but this can be done on any of them. When killing a creature here, if there's one behind the northeastern pillar, it can't attack you on this tile, but if you move just one tile closer, it can. For this reason, and more that I will go into in the stacking part, it's important to allow creatures to attack you first or move into position before engaging them. As mentioned earlier, unintentionally moving out into line of sight of multiple creatures will usually kill you in the Colosseum. There are multiple ways to move stacks of creatures, but the goal is to only have to deal with one at a time. Every creature in the Colosseum is very simple on its own. The difficulty is always dealing with many different ones with different attack styles. In the simplest layouts, when you have creatures behind the pillar, when they're stacked side by side like this, you can simply attack them at the corner and the creature next to it won't attack you. As mentioned, if you have a larger creature in front of a shaman, you can use any safe spot to mage or range one tile past the pillar near the wall, or if you prefer, you can simply freeze the larger creature, step out whilst against the wall, and the smaller one will walk around it. However, if the shaman is the one at the front in front of a larger creature, move from one side of the pillar to the other and it'll free both of them up. You can then go around the pillar and kill them one at a time. This only works though on the east or west side of a pillar, but occasionally this also works when there's 3 creatures too, and one is a shaman. If you have a smaller creature in front of a larger creature on a particularly difficult setup, you can pray against the hardest hitting one, step 1 square out, wait a second, and then step 1 square back in. What happens here is the creature next to it will then block it from going back, and it'll then come around the corner towards you. You do tank 1 hit with that one, but again for this method we use a melee with a Blood Fury and you're going to heal right back up anyway. For the more complicated waves with multiple larger creatures behind a pillar, we need to move pillars in the following way. But first, always try to kill anything that is safe to do so at the current pillar before you move to another one. So if there's 2 ranges on one side of a pillar, kill one of them before moving on. Hopefully you're using the strategy in the video, because it means the manticores are never charged up initially. So the first time you have to move pillars, they aren't even going to attack you. However, if you do need to move and one is charged, you always want to prioritize praying against it when moving. But we can also make sure it's on the same tick as another creature. From this position, if you run south from this tile, the creature at the back will always attack 1 tick faster than the one at the front. But if you run out from this square, they will attack you on the exact same tick. In this instance, I want to run out on the tile closest to the pillar, because that way the manticore is 1 tick ahead of the ranger. The first tick is then going to be a mage attack by the manticore only, the second tick is then going to be a range attack by both, and the third tick is a melee by the manticore only. That may sound complicated, but the result is I can run from this pillar to the one in the south and just concentrate on praying against the manticore, knowing the range is going to be protected from at the same time. Then, after the manticore has finished its attack, I switch to range as the ranger will attack again, but the manticore won't, because it takes a while to charge up again. By running to the south pillar, creatures that were stacked behind each other previously will now be side by side, and one will come around the pillar because it's being blocked by the other one, and you can kill it alone. If you have 3 creatures stacked up, the one in this location won't attack you when you're running to the southwest pillar unless there's a shaman in front of it. It effectively hasn't got a line of sight on you whilst it's being blocked by a creature with a long range. The only reason it attacks you with a shaman in front of it is because the shaman moves as you get further away. In this instance, when I run, the manticore isn't even going to charge up. The other manticore will charge, but it won't attack as it doesn't have time, and all I need to do is pray range and I'll take no damage at all. When they reach the next pillar, the manticore or whatever creature was in its location will come down this side of the pillar again, whilst the other 2 get stuck in a line. As always, don't attack the manticore until it attacks you, to make sure it's safe spotted, and then kill it and you've got 2 left. In this case, it's a javelin and a manticore, but it doesn't really matter what they are. If you've done this right, the manticore won't have a charge, but even if it does, it's absolutely fine. Unfortunately, we can't manipulate the ticks this side of the pillar as far as I'm aware, so if you have 2 things left that attack with different combat styles, simply pray against the one that hits the hardest, which is usually manticores, and if you don't have any of those, it's the shockwave. Absolute worst case scenario here, you have to tank 2 hits from a javelin, and again, with your blood barrage and so on, you're going to heal up anyway. It's important to note that when running to the southwest and then to the southeast pillar in this method, in the direction that I've just done, standing behind them in the middle of the square will always make one of them go down the side of the pillar, so you can attack it and the other will be safe spotted, but that isn't always the case. If you're using this tactic for any other pillar, I recommend running to the tile behind the pillar on the side that the creatures are on, like this. That ensures one always comes down the side of the pillar. Then, when it's got past, move back to the middle and then attack it from a safe position. This is because standing in the middle of a pillar will sometimes cause the edge of the one that normally comes down the side to catch on the front of it, meaning you need to run to another pillar again. Lastly, if you have 3 at the start and the 2 that can attack you is a javelin and a shockwave, this time start on this tile here and pray against the creature at the back. Running from here will mean it attacks 1 tick faster, so you can pray against it and run out, and as soon as you see the animation, switch protection prayers to the other one. Switch back again and then do that again before you get around the pillar. And again, you won't take any damage. Or alternatively, if you're not comfortable doing that, just pray against the hardest hitting thing, and whilst the javelin does have a max hit of 48, we can usually tank 2 javelin hits pretty easily and heal up afterwards. You can also get 3 in a line behind a pillar. Hopefully one is a manticore that hasn't charged, so again it won't attack you when you move around the first pillar, but again if it is charged before you moved, use this tile to make sure the manticore is on the same tick as the next hardest hitting creature and you'll still be fine. We're going to move to this pillar again, but this time 2 creatures are going to try and come down the side of the pillar. All you do is you run to here, but just as they're about to reach the pillar, go out to this side, and this creature will be safe spotted. Obviously, make sure you're praying correctly before you move back out. If you time it correctly, you'll be able to kill that creature, and then the next one will move along for you to kill afterwards as well. But if 2 get stuck on the other side of the pillar, don't worry at all. Simply run back to the first pillar that you started on the north side to split them up again. Finally is the hardest setup, which is 2 side by side and then 2 behind them in a line. The problem with this is 2 are going to come around the side of the pillar when we move and both attack you at the same time. And if you go around to the other side of the pillar, you're going to have the same problem. You could just pray for like either 2, but I find it easier and safer to do the following. Make sure that you've got high health and move to the southwest pillar again, praying as before against the hardest hitting NPCs, but this time stop on the first tile as you go around the pillar. If you stay here, you're going to end up with 2 down the side, so we need to move back 1 tile at just the right time. By stepping back out before they reach the pillar, it will leave just enough space for one of the NPCs coming down the side to get stuck on the edge of the pillar. Of course, when stepping back out, make sure you're ready to pray against the 2 creatures here and then move back in after they've attacked. That's going to mean you can kill the one down the side all by itself, leaving 3 left. From here, this creature will not be able to attack you when you're running to the next pillar, although I generally give it a little bit of a wider berth just to make sure. So pray against the 2 creatures that can attack you and run to the next pillar. As usual, stand in the middle tile and wait to be attacked before killing the one that's separated. With the last 2 creatures, run to the northeast pillar and they'll be separated and you can kill them one at a time again. This tactic will always allow you to kill one thing at a time, which takes away the hardest part of the Colosseum. It is slower, but you can pick up the speed when you're used to it, and then you can easily add in more gear or pray for like multiple NPCs at a time. For the modifiers, it seems to offer you ones that you're already tier 1 or tier 2 in far more frequently than it does new ones. So always choose a new unlock you want later whenever it pops up, even if there's a tier 2 you prefer over it. Chances are it will offer you the tier 2 again, but it may never offer you the other one. In the setup, there's deliberately a lot of restore potions, because blasphemy becomes irrelevant in this tactic when you're taking so little damage and have a ton of restores anyway. Frailty up until tier 2 is usually a pretty free choice in my opinion, for the waves anyway, but I'll come to the boss shortly. I don't take tier 3 on that one though, because with bad RNG you can get hit for 60 off a few things, which, although quite rare, is incredibly frustrating to me, although I will take it as a last resort. Myopia, which reduces your attack distance by 2 tiles per level, only really hurts when ranging. The distance on most staffs mean that even at tier 2, you can use these safe spots as long as you stand on this tile. And the vast majority of things that we're going to be killing with melee anyway, making that completely irrelevant. Relentless is really punishing if you make a mistake, even tier 1. But once you have this strategy down, you take very little damage, and it becomes a really good choice even up to tier 3. Whilst learning, try to keep to those as much as possible up until tier 2, as those ones don't add any new mechanics that you really need to worry about other than what you're already doing, and only when you can't pick any of those, choose one of the following. Out of these, I prefer Volatility, which just means after an enemy dies it explodes and does a little bit of damage. It's just frustrating how many times you forget about it. Quartet spawns 1 extra Fremenic, and since we're freezing, it isn't too much of an issue. However, with Relentless meaning things never miss, if your timing is slightly off freezing at the start and then moving away from them, you can take a decent amount of damage. The last 2 really depend on your preferences. Bees are just a swarm that slowly moves around and poison you if they reach you, which are pretty simple to deal with. The last one is Solar Flare, which puts an orb around each pillar and will damage you if it touches you. It's simple enough to walk through, but it's one more thing to deal with if you get a difficult spawn. However, all of these last ones are only tier 1 choices when you aren't given the option of the better ones, and a lot of the time you won't use any of them. In my opinion, they're just the best ones to learn waves with, but once you can do this consistently, you can then swap some of them out for ones that are better for the boss. If you're new to the Colosseum and you don't want to lose a ton of money, I also recommend just doing waves 1 to 4 a bunch of times. Once you're used to that, doing waves 1 to 7 before finally going for all of the waves. That way you're going to be making a good amount of GP whilst learning, instead of losing half a mil for every single death, which definitely adds up after a while.